I replaced my mailbox with a locked unit after finding open letters. My neighbors said I was paranoid. A week later, my bank accounts were frozen, my credit was damaged, and my tax records were compromised. What the post office clerk told me led to a shocking discovery. I've lived in West Allis, Wisconsin, for almost 14 years. It's not some fancy suburb, but it's a decent, quiet place where most people keep to themselves. My street has the same routine faces. People walking dogs, watering lawns, waving when they have to, but not much more. That suited me fine. I work from home doing tax consulting, and I like my privacy. But back in January, things started to feel off. It started small. I'd get home from a run or from grocery shopping and check the mail. I'd find envelopes crammed in wrong, bent, or looking like they'd been messed with. At first, I just assumed it was rough handling. We'd had some cold snaps and snow, and I figured maybe the mailman was rushing. But then one day, I pulled out a bank statement that had clearly been sliced open at the top. Not ripped, sliced, with something sharp. It was still inside the envelope, but you could easily read the account info and balance through the gap. That made my stomach turn. I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, but then my W-2 didn't show up. It had been mailed 2 weeks before. My company confirmed it was sent. I waited, thinking it would turn up late. It never did. That's when I started really paying attention. Every couple days, I'd find new little signs, missing envelopes, ones with sticky flaps torn open, pieces of mail crammed so deep I had to pry them out. I talked to my local post office. They were polite but useless. The guy at the counter told me maybe it was just wind damage or the flap came loose in transit. I told him I knew what tampered mail looked like. I'd worked with enough clients who'd had identity theft issues. He didn't seem interested. "We'll keep an eye on it," he said, but I could tell nothing was going to happen. So I took matters into my own hands. I went online and ordered a secure locking mailbox. Big, heavy-duty steel with a slot too small for fingers or tools. It was expensive, but I didn't care. I even paid someone to install it right into the concrete base so no one could just yank it out. That was the only way I was going to sleep at night. The day it got installed, my neighbor Ron was out in his yard trimming his hedges. He's this old guy, mid-60s, maybe, retired, always puttering around outside. He's one of those neighbors who watches everyone from behind his curtains. He's made comments before about my packages, my car, even once about my trash bin being out too long. I always ignored him. But this time, he didn't hold back. "You replacing your mailbox?" he asked, giving me that smug half-grin. "Yeah," I said. "Had some issues with tampering." Ron laughed. "Tampering? What? You think someone's stealing your mail? This neighborhood?" I just nodded. "Better safe than sorry." He shook his head and chuckled. "People are so paranoid these days. Drama over nothing." I didn't respond. But something about how quickly he dismissed it rubbed me wrong. 1 week after I installed the locked box, everything exploded. I was trying to pay my phone bill online and couldn't log into my bank account. Said I was locked out for security reasons. I called them, and they told me there had been multiple failed logins from a different device. They flagged the account and froze it. I thought that was bad until I checked my credit. Someone had applied for 2 new credit cards and a personal loan using my name. They had my full info: name, social security, address, employer, even income level. One card had already been approved and charged $3,000 in electronics. Then the IRS called. They flagged my file because someone had filed a second tax return using my SSN. I hadn't even filed yet. That's when I lost it. My entire financial life was being ripped apart. I kept thinking, how did they get my social, my bank info, my tax forms? The only place those things existed physically were in the mail. That missing W-2, that bank statement, the envelope that never came from my accountant. I went back to the post office and asked to talk to someone who handled deliveries. I got a young clerk, Tony, who looked a little nervous when I mentioned Ron. "I'm not supposed to talk about routes," he said. "But I've seen that guy, your neighbor, hanging around your mailbox a couple times before you got the new one. Thought maybe he was just picking up his own. But now that you mention all this, I don't know." He couldn't say more without getting into trouble, but I could see it in his face. He knew something wasn't right. That's when it hit me like a brick. Ron. The same guy who laughed at me for getting a locked mailbox. The one who knew when my mail came, who was always outside pretending to garden or clean his driveway. He saw everything. I checked my security cam. I didn't have a direct shot of the old mailbox, but I had motion capture set up near my front steps. Sure enough, there he was, Ron, walking past my property during the day and sometimes at night, lingering near the box area. He wasn't just passing by. He'd stop, glance around, and move toward it. I didn't have video of him taking anything, but it was enough to raise suspicion. I brought the footage to the police. They said it wasn't concrete proof. Without a clear shot of him physically taking mail, their hands were tied. But I wasn't letting it go. Not after the credit mess. The hours spent on the phone with banks and credit bureaus, the IRS breathing down my neck, the panic attacks at 2 a.m. I knew who it was, and I wasn't just going to protect myself. I was going to take him down. After I filed the police report, I expected Ron to lay low. But instead, he got bolder. 2 days later, I found deep scratches on the side of my new locked mailbox. Not just random scrapes. These were prime marks. Someone had tried to force it open with a screwdriver or crowbar. They failed, but they left damage. And they left a message. I wasn't safe yet. I showed the marks to the police, and again, they shrugged. Could be vandalism, they said. No cameras caught it happening, right? Right. Because the angle of my camera didn't cover that side of the box. I was kicking myself. I bought a second camera and set it up across the street with a full view, but that wouldn't help with what already happened. Meanwhile, my life kept falling apart. My credit score dropped over 100 points. I had to shut down 2 of my business accounts. A client dropped me after their documents got tied up in one of the fraud alerts. My accountant warned me that sorting out the IRS mess could take months, maybe longer. I was barely sleeping. I kept replaying every little interaction with Ron in my head. How many times had I seen him outside pretending to sweep the sidewalk? How many times did I wave at him like a neighbor while he stood there holding my mail in his dirty hands? I tried to confront him once. It was a Wednesday morning, and he was out trimming his bushes again. I walked right up and said, "Ron, have you been messing with my mailbox?" He didn't even flinch. "You really think I have time to steal your bills?" he said, smirking again. "I'm retired, not bored." "Funny," I said. "Someone's been trying to pry open my new box." "Right after you mocked me for getting it." He just shook his head and turned back to his clippers. "Maybe you should look at who you're giving your info to. Seems like you've got other problems." He was taunting me. After that, I started digging into Ron. I went to the county clerk's office and pulled public records. Divorce 10 years ago. A foreclosure on a rental property in 2014. A lawsuit over some kind of mail fraud back in 2003 that had been settled quietly. I found his ex-wife on Facebook. I messaged her, carefully explaining what was going on, saying I lived next door to Ron and I believed he was stealing mail again. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one the next day. Her message was short. "You're not the first. Be careful. He's good at covering his tracks." I stared at that sentence for a long time. A week later, I got a call from a different neighbor, Pam, 2 doors down. She said, "Hey, sorry if this is weird, but did you ever get weird vibes from Ron? I just found my daughter's birthday card opened and resealed. There was supposed to be $40 inside. It's gone." That was the moment I knew I wasn't crazy. Ron was doing this to other people. And he wasn't just stealing mail. He was stealing time, trust, money, people's sense of safety. So I started talking to neighbors. Quietly, carefully, asking questions, planting seeds. Some of them had stories. One said a Netflix DVD never showed up. Another said a package got marked delivered, but never arrived. Little things that never added up until now. I realized something else. Ron had picked me because I lived alone, worked from home, and had a predictable routine. I wasn't supposed to notice. I wasn't supposed to fight back. But I was watching now. I was documenting. I was building a case. And I wasn't alone anymore. About a week after I started talking to neighbors, something strange happened. I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of printer paper with 4 words typed in bold. "Drop it or else." That was it. No signature. No details. Just those 4 words. At first, I froze. My hands actually shook. I stood in my kitchen staring at that note for 5 full minutes. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't some prank. It was a threat. I didn't go to the police right away. I wasn't sure if they'd take it seriously. They hadn't taken anything else seriously up to that point. Instead, I scanned it, saved a copy, and slipped the original into a Ziploc bag with gloves on. Then I started checking all the footage from my new outdoor camera. I didn't catch the person dropping the letter into my box, but I did catch Ron standing across the street at 5:42 a.m. that morning, staring at my house for a full 2 minutes before walking back inside. I started sleeping with the lights on. I put a motion detector on my front lawn. I added a smart lock to the front door. I kept a crowbar under the couch. Then came the second twist. I got a call from a detective, not the one I originally filed with, but someone from a different division. He said my name came up in an investigation about a stolen identity case connected to a fraud ring targeting local tax professionals. Apparently, 3 other consultants in nearby cities had been hit in similar ways: mail tampering, stolen W-2s, fraudulent tax returns filed in their names. They had reason to believe it wasn't random. "We think someone is targeting people who handle sensitive financial data," the detective said. "It's not just theft, it's planned." I told him everything. About Ron. The open mail. The scratches on my new mailbox. The weird threat letter. The neighbors with missing cards and lost packages. He listened carefully, and then he asked, "Do you know anyone who could have helped him get access to other clients' info? Was your computer ever accessed by someone else? Any maintenance guys? Cleaners?" It hadn't been. I kept that room locked. But then it hit me. 2 years ago, when I had a hip injury, I'd hired a temp assistant to help with paperwork and filing. Her name was Melinda. She worked out of my home office for about 3 months. I fired her after I found her browsing through personal files she wasn't assigned to. Guess who she listed as her emergency contact on her employment form? Ronald. Same last name. I checked my records. Melinda Ardot. Same last initial as Ron. I went cold. I hadn't seen her since I let her go. But what if she and Ron had kept in touch? What if she told him how easy it would be to get into my mail? What if she'd even taken copies of client files back then? Suddenly, it wasn't just some cranky old man messing with a mailbox. It was a setup, a plan, maybe even a long one. I called the detective back and gave him Melinda's full name and all the details I had. He paused and said, "That changes things." It sure did. Now it wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger, wider, and messier. But here's the part that made my skin crawl. The next day, I caught Ron in my driveway, just standing there. When I opened the front door, he didn't flinch. He looked at me and said, dead calm, "You're digging in the wrong dirt." Then he walked away. After Ron showed up in my driveway and said those words, "You're digging in the wrong dirt," I knew things were reaching a breaking point. That same night, I sent the detective every file I had. Photos, video clips, letters, screenshots of my messages with Ron's ex-wife, Melinda's employment records, and a timeline of every incident. I included the scratches on my mailbox, the identity theft logs, and the threat letter. I wrote everything down in plain detail, start to finish. 3 days later, I got a call. They had opened a formal investigation. Not just on Ron, but Melinda too. Turns out Melinda had moved in with Ron for a while after I let her go. That was when the real mail theft started. She had inside knowledge, my client base, how I operated, even what days I typically mailed documents. She had planted the seeds. Ron had just picked the fruit. The FBI got involved once it crossed into identity theft and tax fraud territory. They tracked purchases made with the fraudulent credit card. 2 laptops, a phone, and a gaming console, all delivered to an address under a fake name. The address? A P.O. box registered to Ronald's alias, Roy H. It was enough. They got a warrant. Ron's house was searched. They found open mail, not just mine. Mail from 4 other neighbors, some going back months. Stacks of envelopes, social security numbers, tax forms, checks that had been lost. One box even had some of my old client documents, likely taken years ago and stored. Ron was arrested. So was Melinda. Ron got charged with multiple counts of mail theft, wire fraud, and identity theft. Melinda got hit with conspiracy to commit fraud and unlawful possession of financial information. In court, Ron tried to act like an old man who didn't know better. Claimed he had memory issues, didn't understand what was happening. But the evidence was too much. The prosecution laid it out clearly: his fingerprints, video clips, and witness statements. I testified. I stared right at him and told the court exactly what he did. How he stood in my driveway and threatened me. How he mocked me. How he cost me clients, time, and peace. He didn't look at me once. Ron got sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Melinda took a plea deal and got 2 years, plus probation. But here's the part that gave me the most satisfaction. After the sentencing, the judge ordered full restitution for damages, $18,000. That included my legal fees, identity recovery costs, and estimated business loss. Ron's house? It was put up for sale to help cover what he owed. His old mailbox? The one he used to sneak past mine every day? It sat empty, rusted, and dented while a for sale sign stood in front of it. As for me, I rebuilt. Slowly. Clients came back. The IRS cleared my record. I fixed my credit over the next year. I upgraded my security system. I joined a local neighborhood watch and shared my story at town hall. I also started helping others spot early signs of mail fraud, giving talks at libraries, helping older residents install secure mailboxes, even hosting free tax safety seminars. I turned the worst thing that ever happened to me into something useful. And every time I walk past that empty house where Ron used to live, I feel one thing: peace. Because he thought I'd stay quiet. He thought I'd ignore it. He thought I was just being paranoid. But I knew the truth. And I made sure the world knew it too.